Welcome to April's Garage. There's a new tariff in town, really shaking things up. We thought we were going to have a kind of a breather for a second, but things are getting wild again.
Well, we thought COVID was weird when it came to new cars, when it came to collector cars, when it came to everything, what happened in the COVID psychoness. And here we go again.
Right?
No normalcy. It's just back to crazy stuff with all of these tariffs. So if you haven't been following, Trump just imposed a bunch of tariffs, but on all imported cars, 25% tariff on all cars built outside of the U.S., assembled. Right. But now, components now have a specific tariff. And when it comes to major automaker countries, like the European Union, it is a 20% tariff on things coming in from the European Union. So South Korea, it is 25%.
And these are just for parts, not fully assembled cars.
Right. So the United Kingdom, Trump is responding with a only 10% tariff. Right. So if you're nice to us, we'll be nice to you, basically, right, is this policy. And it is totally lighting the world on fire.
Yeah, but I don't get, like, what happens if you're, like, mining the products, whatever you need to make aluminum, and you're mining these here, but then you don't actually build those parts where you're mining them. You're, casting a piston in Germany, and you're all over the place. Like, how do you even keep track?
Then it's just the raw materials
of all those things.
Yeah. They do it, obviously, when they're buying the components. There is a transaction, and when that transaction happens, there's going to be a tax on top of it. Right. So it's pretty. It's not like they're going to be smuggling in like rare raw materials in these automakers because they need it to ride off to build the components and all that stuff.
Right, but the people that are actually making these materials could be in a different country. So then are they taxing that as well? And it's just
everything.
tax to tax, and it's just cluster F. Because I'm not going to say the full word of everything. Who's going to keep track of that?
So VinFast, the car that's built in Vietnam, the goofy electric car that nobody bought, now is up almost 50% in price. So it's a $30,000 car now. It's a $45,000 car. But just one example there with VinFast, that ends their ability to sell cars in the United States competitively. Nobody was buying them before, but certainly nobody's going to buy them now that it's $50,000 supposedly with tariffs if they don't lower the prices themselves. Right. So they could take the hit and eat it. And some companies are saying they're not going to raise prices even with these tariffs, but that means they're eating a massive amount. So like luxury automakers, they're talking about Ferrari and Lamborghini. Lamborghini, for example, is trying to ship as many cars in as they possibly can, like things that aren't even fully put together yet. Just getting them on the boat, getting them over here, flying them and getting them in before the door slams shut on this 25%, because on a $500,000 car, that is over $100,000 in tariff. That's $100,000 more. Right. And with Ferrari, people are using it as an excuse to cancel orders, because Ferrari now is forcing people to buy things that aren't making the money. So you used to be able to buy a rare Ferrari, like a rare limited production Ferrari, and flip it and make a couple $100,000. But now you can't. Like the SF90 is depreciating several $100,000 in a couple of years. Sure. So people want to get out of their big deposits, and if they're raising the price, then they're able to wiggle their way out of these deposits.
Now, is there room for negotiation with these countries? Like, do you think that's one of the goals that Trump's trying to do with these tariffs?
I'll let you talk politics on this one if you want to face the wrath of the commenters.
I'm not sure.
Because
I don't know.
I'm not going there. I'm not going in that guy's head or guessing what he wants to do. I'm just sort of reporting this because it's if you go into the political part of it and what's in his head and what he's doing, that's a whole different can of worms. Just what's happening here with cars is interesting enough, I think. So Japanese automakers really screwed in this one because their tariffs were so high. So in Japan, they had a 46% tariff. And so the U.S. responded with a 24% tariff. So that's all components made in Japan. Now, a lot of cars are made in the U.S. from Japan. So for Toyota, they build a lot of stuff in Kentucky, the Camry, the RAV4, the Lexus ES. In Indiana, they have engines, Highlander, Sienna. In Texas, they make the Tundra. In Mississippi, the Corolla. In Tennessee, they make engine, transmission, components and things. So a lot of stuff in the U.S. is made there. But a lot of it's in Mexico as well. So like the Tacoma, for example, a lot of the Tacoma trucks are built in Mexico. So a cheap truck, say $30,000 with a $25,000 tariff on it, and the components are higher as well, that base $30,000 truck now becomes a base $47,000 truck, unless Toyota eats it somewhere, which is tough. It makes it very uncompetitive, and then people go buy Fords and buy, they don't buy the Toyota Tacoma because before everybody bought the Tacoma and didn't buy the Ford Ranger,
Sure.
didn't buy the Dodge Dakota, didn't buy the Chevy Colorado or whatever before the S10 because the Tacoma was so well built and held its value so well.
Right.
So that's a big one. Nissan is the one that's really like unbelievably screwed.
Like, are they going to go out of business? Like, how bad is it for them?
It's certainly possible. I just don't see how it's going to work because they're double screwed because they're a Japanese company. So the components that are made in Japan are taxed at a very high rate. And then they went all in on building cars in Mexico instead of the U.S. So that's 25%. So the Versa, the Sentra, the Kicks, the Altima.
Uh-oh.
Mexico.
The Altima.
I think the trucks are in the U.S., but the cheap cars.
Right. They're going to have a
smoked.
Luxury car price tag soon.
They're totally
coming
smoked.
here.
And the ultra luxury cars like from Lexus, the flagship models and the other stuff in Japan, they're still built in Japan. So they face this higher tariff level where once again, it's going to be way, way more than an S-Class, which an S-Class, even in the European Union, is 20%.
Sure.
So at $100,000 on the Mercedes S-Class, that's 25% more, so $20-something thousand more. It is insane.
So are you picturing in the future more manufacturing happening than in America?
Well, that's the goal. Once again, you're going to the political end
I went up
where
to
the
the
comment
edge
section you go.
line.
I'm just talking about what's going on
over.
right now,
Right.
and it is totally nuts. So in the short term, we talked about how luxury automakers are trying to ram through as many cars as they can, but I don't see how like Aston Martin is able to sell a single car in the United States with these tariffs. They're already overpriced and known for their huge depreciation. If an Aston Martin is $100,000 more, nobody's going to buy them. Maserati, already on death's door, already way too expensive, with a 25% tariff on top of that. Like, how?
Right.
Who is buying that?
Well, so saying that, do you think that's going to change the value on your Aston Martin?
On my old one, that's the thing. I don't know.
What is going to happen with our older cars?
The
Are they
older
become more
cars-
valuable because they're cheaper somehow?
It's interesting because the 25-year rule was working really well for importing cars from countries where they weren't as valued. So you're finding some rare Lamborghinis, Ferraris, and things, and bringing them into the U.S. from Japan, from Europe, through auctions, and selling them that way, where there's a big shortage of gated manual or special cars like that Vanquish.
Right.
Now they're subject to a big tariff. Even though they're used, they're still subject to a big tariff. So all of a sudden, what's in the U.S. now becomes more special.
Yeah, a lot more special.
A lot more special. Because now you can't go to Europe or an auction in Japan and bring these over without a 25% tariff. So what is here now is very special. And people buying these super expensive hypercars, these hybrid things that people were already not very enthusiastic about, now they're with a 20% tariff for a normal production Ferrari is going to be, $700,000. People aren't going to buy that. They're going to want to buy a used one. They're going to buy an older one. And you bet they're going to get more expensive. The existing Lamborghinis that have showed up as far as the Revueltos, the new stuff, I imagine the old pricing and the new pricing, there's no way they're going to eat it. So the people who got the early cars are going to have more valuable cars.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's going to be really strange.
Well, would it be cool? Okay, because there's 5.5 acres of farmland around us for sale right now. Maybe Ferrari can manufacture back here in Kansas, right?
They've never built a car outside of Italy their entire lives. So.
And why not come to Kansas for your first Ferrari?
That is definitely not going to happen. But the Japan one, I guess, was a surprise to everybody because they do have high tariffs. But that is a big hit. So Honda builds a lot of cars in the U.S., most of their cars. So they're okay. And like Korea, for example, Trump had the CEO of Hyundai out and touted him as like the reason why tariffs are working and his big billions of dollars of investment in new manufacturing in the U.S. It's going to be really interesting how this all shakes out. The one automaker that is going backwards on all of this is Ford. And they just announced employee pricing on everything. Not to do a Ford commercial, but even though their components prices are going to go up, if you drive around any Ford dealership right now, they are full, packed to the gills with leftover 2024s. I think our local Ford store has 700 cars on the ground, which is, we're in Kansas, so that's like It's nuts.
Yeah.
So a lot of excess inventory. So they are doing their blowout of all blowout pricing that I only remember them doing maybe once or twice in the last 10 to 15 years.
Sure,
So
yeah.
basically what employees pay to the general public, which for the dealers themselves is great because they're getting rid of excess inventory. For the car salesman, which is what I used to be, it sucks because it means it's a mini deal on all of them. They're making like $150, $200 a car instead of being able to hold the gross.
Right.
But the dealers themselves actually get a 5%, I think, incentive back from Ford. So they're not losing money. But Stellantis is the one that's going to be unbelievably screwed because we drove their Hornet.
Oh.
Made in Italy.
Yeah, they don't need to make that anymore.
So $40,000 for that.
Right.
25% tariff on top of it.
No.
Can you imagine?
That's done for sure. Hands down. That's not going to happen.
A $50,000 Hornet, who's buying that? No, nobody's buying that.
That's scary.
So Stellantis really in deep doo-doo. Of the big three, there's another bankruptcy very possible with that one because they have no idea what they're doing. Ford and GM, they can figure it out and be okay. Even though there's a lot made in Mexico and Canada with both of those automakers, that I feel like they can figure it out. Stellantis has been on the struggle bus from inception, and now with this tariff on top of it, like they are so smoked. But it'll be weird. We have no more Aston Martin in the U.S., no more Maserati in the U.S.
That's sad.
Pausing production, I imagine, on a lot of imports to the U.S. And then what is going to happen? It's going to be...
Yeah, is our used cars going to get to the prices they were during COVID, where that was kind of a boom? And I guess we'll find out shortly.
Here we go again.
Thanks so much for watching.